Hey, it's the Productize Podcast. I'm Brian Castle. Thanks for tuning in. Today I'm actually catching up with an old friend, Philip Morgan of Philip Morgan Consulting, although he doesn't do much direct consulting anymore. Philip is I believe, one of the great solo productized service offerers. I'll call him that. I don't think he would say that. But, Philip has been known as sort of like an expert when it comes to positioning, especially for independent consultants and technical consultants and technical firms. And it's been interesting to me how he has adapted his solo practice of consulting and offering workshops and incubators and these sorts of different programs. Now, a word of warning, unfortunately, my call with Philip got cut short a little bit. So this is going to be a shorter interview than usual. Where Philip is at, his power actually cut out while we were recording, and we were on a battery for a little while there, but then all of a sudden, whoop, Philip's gone. So, but I think we did get a good 20-minute or so conversation in. So I still wanted to publish it, and I hope that sometime in the next few months we'll have Philip back on here for like a part B. But I did want to get the stuff that we did talk about published because it was good stuff. Philip is one of these. He has a lot of wisdom to share, and what I really liked about what he does is his ability to structure these big, deep ideas about what it means to position your business, to structure it into tangible activities and tangible momentum. It's not just a book or a course that hopefully you'll take action on. He actually directly helps his customers form a habit into putting these things into action. And I think that's more valuable than anything. So without further ado, here is my abbreviated conversation with Philip Morgan. Enjoy. I'm here with Philip Morgan. Philip, how's it going?
Brian, it's good. Trying something that I was told would help my throat, which is pineapple juice. Apparently that's what opera singers do to sort of keep their vocal cords lubricated. So,
oh, wow.
Hopefully it'll work great.
I wouldn't expect pineapple juice. Think of like tea and things like that, but
me neither. A client told me about it, and apparently it's kind of syrupy and goopy enough that it kind of sticks there and lubricates your vocal cords for longer than those other thinner liquids do.
Yeah, I've been drinking water on podcasts, and unfortunately I had a coffee like a half an hour before this call. So I'm awake, but coffee also does terrible things to the voice. So we'll see. We'll see how this goes.
We'll soldier on. We'll do our best here.
Yep. So, if folks have been listening to this podcast since the early days, a couple of years back, you were one of the guests back in the early episodes of Productize Podcast. And, you've been around the interwebs, these circles doing productized services for many years. I've always been impressed with your work and the way that you focus and communicate, especially the way that you communicate what you do. And I think folks will really learn a lot from how you've structured things. So, before we really dive into everything, like you come from a background as were you like a copywriter first, or what's like your core skill set? And then how have you adapted that?
For me, it was like tech writing, which would be distinct from copywriting because it's a little bit more like writing manuals or writing more factual stuff and less about persuasion or selling, right? So I started as a tech writer. I mean, before that, I was an IT system administrator type. And before that, I was in adult education. So, I reached this point where I productized, but not along the lines of doing copywriting or what have you. I mean, I tried that for a while. Mm-hmm. What I noticed was the procrastination got worse every time I got a new client. And I think the quality kind of went down over time. So it was sort of like, I'm in the wrong line of work and I need to just do something different. So all of that kind of came together in, now it's a little different. Now I'm like, I can challenge people to cultivate expertise and to build a business that's building IP, kind of like your Productize courses. That's really where it ultimately ended up. And my delivery of that is Productize, but really I just needed to get out of implementing stuff and get into something that's more like coaching or inspiring people or advising people. So that was in super short form, that was the evolution for me.
Right.
I went through that moment that you're talking about where I was like, I don't want to work for somebody else, but I don't like working for myself.
Interesting. I remember a few years back, and I'm sure that a lot of this still comes through today, you sort of became known as the guy talking about positioning. And I think probably the last episode that we did together on this show, we talked a lot about that. And you have the positioning book. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that sounds like that was like your pathway into advising other consultants on positioning themselves, or, rather than you directly consulting with other clients.
That was it. That was the prison break for me out of a place. I mean, there was a transitional period, but that's what made it possible. Yeah.
So it was like you identified this idea or this concept that probably worked pretty well for you, but then you turned that into, I guess, like you start to talk about here, is like turning that into your own IP that you can productize.
Yep. And it was just going to be a series of blog posts. And then I read Amy Hoy's Just Fucking Shit book. And I was like, maybe this could be a book, this, series of blog posts. And so I made it into an ebook, and that sort of took over in a good way.
Curious, because I've experienced some of this with the concept of productized services, been talking about it for many years. With you, like with the idea of positioning and, teaching people how to better position themselves, how has that idea evolved in these last couple of years? And maybe like how have you evolved in like how you explain it or teach it? Has that taken new forms?
Yeah. And I've heard other folks reflect on like the early version of something they were doing and the current version. And let's say there's been 5, 10, 15 years of development between the two. And they'll have a kind of humility about that early version and basically, how it sucked compared to the current version. And I haven't even had quite that much time, but the early version was me feeling like kind of coming across in a somewhat dogmatic way, saying essentially, this specialization thing is magic. Just do it and, magic will happen. Mm-hmm. And now I'm very careful to say this is not magic. It's a different way of applying a large amount of effort. So instead of an ineffective way of applying a large amount of effort, it's a more effective way. It's finding a beachhead. I'm not a sports fan, and it was never enlisted in the U.S. Army, but, sometimes the sports and military metaphors are helpful. Mm-hmm. Beachhead's a military metaphor. It's finding a place where you can invade, and from that you can kind of expand or accomplish some larger purpose. So specialization now, or, positioning, specialization, positioning are kind of two ends of the same process. I look at it as a beachhead. It's a way to take your little insignificant amount of effort that you can apply on a global scale anyway, and actually make a significant difference. And what you're doing is getting some leverage. It makes it easier for you to build trust and makes it easier to get visibility for what you're doing. So I think my way of framing it or explaining it has evolved a little bit and become something simpler, something less shrouded in these tones of like it's magic and everybody should do it. And I try to incorporate, when I work with people, I try to incorporate a lot more context. And I don't think everyone should specialize, for example. I think it depends a lot on the context.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I was reading through, some of the information that you have about your expertise incubator. I want to get into that in just a bit, like about how you define the 3 core challenges. It seems like a very tangible way of actually implementing a lot of what you talk about. But I mean, before we get into that, what does your actual consulting, how does that take form today? And so I know that you do some some coaching, you have the incubator program. Like how is it all kind of broken up, and like what's the lay of the land there for Philip Morgan Consulting?
Yeah, the problem here is I should just drop the consulting from my business name. I mean, I do, like I worked earlier this year with a custom software development shop. They do a lot of Drupal work on their positioning. So when I do consulting, honestly, it's a little bit rare nowadays. And I think where I can help is where folks who actually their services are more productized, folks like David Baker, where they're not a great fit because the client wants something that doesn't quite fit what they do. And I think, a good sort of plan B for those clients. Again, the consulting I do is minimal. I think it's enough that I sort of have a hand in the game, so to speak.
Right.
But almost everything I do is some sort of a productized service that's aimed at supporting independent consultants and helping them cultivate a distinct, differentiated market position and really valuable expertise. So it's pretty much all these days workshops and the expertise incubator. So I run these workshops. They are, they're not training exactly, but they're standardized in the way that training is. It's the same curriculum every time. It's a little bit like your productized course, except it's a live cohort, and it's not delivered as like an asynchronous experience. It's synchronous, and it's over a set period of time and so forth. So I do those workshops, and then I have this thing called the expertise incubator, which is maybe the evolution of everything I've been thinking about for the last, 3 to 5 years in terms of how people can monetize their thinking rather than just get good at a skill, which there's nothing wrong with the latter. It's just it didn't work out well for me. Mm-hmm. And as we were talking about earlier, that path wasn't for me. And so, a different path was, and instead of trying to create a recipe that recreates what I did and sell that recipe to people, I've been looking at what are some kind of broadly applicable frameworks that people can adopt and some simple practices that they can adopt that will make it likely that they produce something really valuable that looks like an expertise or intellectual property. That's what the expertise incubator is.
Just a minute to tell you about Process Kit. If your operation needs to become more efficient and more predictable so that your team never lets anything fall through the cracks, then it's time to implement Process Kit. Process Kit is process-driven project management software made for powering client services businesses. It's especially designed with productized services in mind. Create powerful SOPs with built-in if this then that automations, and then use those processes to power all of your repeatable projects. Whether you're managing a pipeline of new clients onboarding to your service, or tracking weekly deliverables, sales proposals, marketing assets, or admin work, Process Kit is your team's place for getting it all done. But more importantly, done right. Use our powerful Zapier integration to hook Process Kit into all of your other systems. And if you'd like expert help with improving your processes and automations, ask about our Process Kit Implementer service. Request your free demo and trial at processkit.com. I want to dig into that a little bit more, but first, just to understand like the structure of these things. So the workshops, these tend to be like 1 day, 5 day sort of event based.
That's a great question because to me it highlights the need for two kinds of things at least. One is like kind of an intense, immersive experience, and then a different kind of experience that uses the benefit of time, like uses the passage of time to create value. So these workshops are the latter. They take place over 2 months. We meet weekly. So, roughly 8 meetings of a group online. It's not in person, and it never was. Not even before COVID. It was always online, never in person. And so we are working on something together. I mean, everybody's working individually, but we're doing it as a group. Something like testing a market position, or working on cultivating a point of view. And we're working on it over the course of those 2 months. And I think I say that the passage of time can add value because there's a lot of stuff where it feels great to have that kind of dive in immersive experience. And for some stuff, that's probably the best way to do it. But I'm interested in these sorts of changes that people make to their business that take time.
Yep.
They're the not easy ones. They're not. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus by saying, "Oh, if your thing can happen quickly, it's not important." And I don't mean that. But some of the important stuff just takes time, and I like supporting that.
I think you're right that there's just a lot of things that no matter which way you slice it, you have to let that time play out.
Right.
For me, as a business owner, thinking about sometimes I get really excited about an idea, and I think I've figured it all out just over the course of taking a shower. It's like, all right, I got this shiny idea. I'm done. I'm gonna launch it by the end of today.
Yeah, right.
But then I let it sit for a little while, and all of a sudden, like completely new angles on it, new opportunities arise. Like you just got to kind of marinate in it for a little while before the true forming happens.
Yeah. So you use the example maybe of a service or a product idea. Imagine if it's the entire strategic direction of your business.
Right.
So it's like, you don't have to imagine. Most people hear me say that and they're like, oh, wow, that I feel fear. I feel a sense of uncertainty about whether it's the right decision. So with that stuff, I think if people, like you said, marinate in it for a while, they make a better decision because, they're not having like this peak moment of like, yes, I can do this. And, I can do this bold, courageous thing, which they can, but they'll go away from that peak moment and have a lot of uncertainty creep in after the fact. So
yeah, it's true. And I mean, now is actually such a great time that we're talking because it's December 2020. And this is always the time of year when I start to really think strategically, big picture, what does next year look like and all that. And I think you're right. Like these big strategic new directions that are maybe scary, maybe new and exciting, giving it a little bit of time to like try it on, mentally, right?
Yeah.
Before you fully commit. But if you at least commit to say like a 2-month period of let's try this on and really explore it just for 2 months. And maybe at the end, it's not going to be right, but at least we've given it a solid chance.
Exactly.
I would have thought that these workshops would have been the shorter thing. Like, how does that compare to the expertise incubator in terms of structure?
That's even longer.
Yeah.
So the workshops are shorter. So the expertise incubator is this framework for cultivating expertise. And it is, I kind of threw the idea of recipes under the bus earlier, somewhat intentionally. Like, I think that recipes are valuable as a way to get started, but they always have to ultimately be customized to you. So again, they have real value, but the expertise incubator starts with a simple framework. Spend 3 months publishing to an email list daily, 3 times a week at least, ideally every day you work. And that's a challenge. It's framed as a challenge. It's brutally difficult. I'll summarize a few things about it that folks can learn experientially, or they can just, believe me over the next minute or two. It's something you do for yourself more than an email list. So we're kind of repurposing the idea of email marketing and using it for a different purpose with this first challenge. And it's uncomfortable. It's very productive discomfort, I think, but it's super uncomfortable. And it's not email marketing. You're not trying to sell stuff. What you're trying to do is give yourself an opportunity to think about the stuff that you don't know as much as you'd like to, and probably your market has not figured out. Do it in public, and it's a little bit for the benefit of the folks who are on the email list, but it's mostly for your own benefit. And you kind of, as you do this, you explore different ideas, you sort of wander around. You don't really have an agenda. You certainly do not have a content marketing plan as you do this, because you're not really doing content marketing. You're sort of exploiting this weird, it's not a loophole exactly, but this weird place where you can create some value for the subscribers on your email list by publishing daily, but you create a lot more value for your own future expertise, You build up that through doing a lot of thinking in public. So that's the first challenge. And
I mean, I really like that because it's like exploration, and yeah, you probably will benefit from publishing or sending to your list 3 times a week from a quote unquote content marketing standpoint.
Right.
And I guess chances are that might help your business, help with leads, help with sales. But ultimately, even if it doesn't, it's still a really good thing to do.
Yeah.
Like you're going to learn so much about yourself. Like you said, you're developing this expertise that you can then build on and uncover new directions that you can go. And it's just sort of like a healthy way to build up like you're building up a muscle, a writing muscle, right?
Exactly.
And so like what I like about the whole structure of this, and we'll get into the other stuff here in a second, like, there's so many courses and programs out there that are like, do this and you'll get this result. But I'm sure you will get results through this, but it's like the result would be different for each person. And it's still a good thing to do.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether it results in the launching a new business in 3 months. Like it might not, but you might open up something else.
Yeah. It's hard for me to sound the right way when I talk about recipes, but I think their value is generating momentum, usually more so than, the recipe worked exactly as designed. And I'm not talking about food recipes. I'm talking about business recipes that are turned into courses. Those have a lot of value, but I think the value is actually this secondary value of, maybe you got the result that the course was supposed to produce. And hopefully you did, but maybe the most important thing is that it generates momentum, and then you start trying things and tweaking, and all of a sudden you're feeling like something you're doing is actually working. And that feeling is just so precious anything you can do that makes that happen, I think is a good thing.
Yeah, for sure. I really like where this is going. The second point in this structure really jumped out to me when I was reading earlier. So you have it here as do research for a decision-making tool for clients. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, the idea of publishing a lot is to build that muscle, and it's also to uncover and befriend uncertainty. So the uncertainty ideally is something your market is uncertain about. We'll do a quick experiment here, and it looks like I have about 5 minutes left on my UPS battery, so we'll see how this goes.
Okay.
Here's the experiment. So Brian, you're looking at a website. Up at the top is a big hero unit, and there's 2 lines of text. One is like a big headline, and then the other's kind of like a tagline. The question is this, and I just to be clear, I do not know the answer to this question. I wish I did. I don't. The question is, what do people assign more weight to, the big headline or the line underneath it as they read it?
That's a good question.
Yeah, well, I don't think anybody knows.
It's interesting because I think, most marketers will tell you, it's the H1, it's the headline, it's the big bold text. And I think that might catch their attention, but what I think people really care about is the second line. And like, all right, well, tell me what this is really all about. Because usually the H1 is just an attention grabber. At least that's how I think about it. So Philip, as he said earlier in this chat, his audio or his power at his house actually cut out. So maybe we'll have to do a part 2 at some point. But we're gonna cut off this interview here. And of course, you can go check out philipmorganconsulting.com. And lots of interesting stuff. He's also pretty active on Twitter. And I just want to thank Philip. I will send him an email. Maybe we can catch up another time. But yeah, this is really great. And I hope you learned something because Philip has a lot of wisdom on this kind of stuff. Thanks for listening. All right. Did that give you something to think about? If it did, let me know on Twitter. I'm @CastJam. If you want to find show notes on this or any of the other episodes, or my weekly newsletter with new content, head over to productizeandscale.com. Now, if you haven't already, a 5-star review in iTunes, that would go a long way to helping other folks find the show. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next time.